it just really makes it difficult as you move forward. And not only that, it's that level of confidence is going to get rid of and knowing and being open-minded and stuff. It's going to reduce any of that type of frustration or sense of being overwhelmed with things. It's really good to have that, holistic mindset. So the next one too is, I would say, don't try strategies, tactics, or other things without having objectives and goals in mind. Because I think what happens a lot of times is people are like, oh, this developer tried this and it worked really well and everything. And it's like, well, what worked really well for them, even if they have tons of great stats and everything else and kind of can answer all your questions, you still need to make sure that you have those right objectives and goals in mind, because sometimes, and sometimes those goals and objectives, like, it's like, hey, we want more wish lists for our site. There could be a lot of other factors and variables there too, that even if it might seem like the same intent on what you're going to do, if their game, for example, is much different than your style of game or various other things, you just want to make sure that you have those certain objectives and goals. And also when you're comparing to other people, like, how much do they really align with those? Because sometimes a lot of these stories that we hear, and the same goes for the negative too, can be anecdotal, and just because someone's sharing some really good helpful information and stats doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same to you. So I would say at the bottom line, though, you want to make sure you have those objectives and goals. Don't just go out trying it because someone else did it and sound good. It goes back to what Mustapha was saying earlier, the status quo. You don't want to just follow the status quo and stuff. Do your homework and make sure, and with everything else we talked about and having that clear sense of direction and everything else, it's going to make when you get to that time where you're coming up with strategies and tactics and other things, that it's going to make that process a lot easier. All right, Mustapha, what's number 3?
Yeah, so making sure to use your gut feeling. In addition to information, research, things like that. Don't just act on a whim, but also trust your instincts.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were initially conceptualizing whatever it is you're aiming to make, there is substance to that if you believe it's something worth pursuing. And typically, if you're interested in something, there's an audience for it. So your instincts are worth something. They're valuable to this process. They cannot work on their own. They need to be backed up with additional resources, research, data, information, communication with audience members, team members, third parties that you might utilize. All of those things work in cohesion, but don't let them eclipse your vision, because that is part of what got you this far to begin with.
Exactly. For number 4, I'll say this is a really simple and easy one. Don't overwhelm yourself. And obviously that could be easier said than done in some cases. But more importantly, my explanation of this is, especially from everything we talked about, well, it is very much so at a high level. A lot of these concepts and ideas, I think, can easily become overwhelming for some people. And if that's the case, just take one and focus on that. You don't have to do all these things at once, because guess what? A lot of people don't do all these things. Those that do, awesome. But it doesn't mean that, like, you can't get to where you want to be if you don't. So if it is a challenge or whatever in that respect, just focus on a few, focus on one, and then become really good and comfortable at that one thing, and then kind of move from there. I wouldn't say necessarily comfortable, because I'm always a proponent of, putting yourself outside of the comfort zone, because that's when really cool and awesome things can start happening. But at least learn it to a point where it's something that could be skilled, or that you learn and you gain that extra sense of confidence. So then you don't necessarily have to worry about it so much anymore, because you're at that point where you're like, hey, look, now I'm ready to move on. So don't overwhelm yourself. It's not worth it. It can burn you out and other things. Yes, easier said than done, but just look and find strategies to help you keep things, simplified. And some of the things we talked about can help with that too, like saying no and staying more focused in particular areas. But yeah, don't do that to yourself. It's not good. And it might take some time to develop that skill set, but it's definitely one to work towards for sure. All right. And last but not least.
Yeah. So really, really, truly think about where you want to be in every facet of what you're doing. Think about the desired outcome of your project. And I think we've, mentioned that numerous times. Different games are made for different purposes, and that is absolutely okay. Everything does not have to be the next Super Meat Boy, where
Right.
Everything that you make, I think, comes from some sort of impulse, and so you have to consider your desired outcome, because that's going to influence how you market. It's going to influence the size of your team. It's going to influence how serious you are about the business component of what you're doing, the timing on when you approach marketing, anybody else that you bring on board, how you go about building and managing your community. Everything ties into desired outcome. And so from the very start of a project, you should be considering what that's going to be precisely.
Yeah, and just, realizing too that, like, if you take that time, as we mentioned with the mission script, and that you really outline that process, you don't have to follow it to the T, because life changes. Your project's going to change and everything. But as long as you still have a definition that is and purpose and everything else that is moldable, which it is. That's what it's designed to do and should be. It's essential to put that in place and know that it will change. So don't ever think that it has to be set in stone or anything like that. But as Mustapha said, like, you really want to think about where you want to be, because everything that he outlined is going to be kind of like help you to hit those goals. Because a classic example, if you don't have a clear direction, like let's say if you're traveling in a plane and you're using a compass, or you're going by a certain degree, but you don't necessarily know where you want to go, 1 degree off can send you very, very far from where maybe you really wanted to be. So I would just leave you with that analogy too, and that's why the importance of understanding and being clear with your intent, but knowing that it might shift a little ways. Like on that airplane trip, you might hit a storm and have to detour slightly, but it's going to happen, and having that clarity is just going to help you get there.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You made it to the end. Now you get the bonus.
Yeah, the bonus. So in light of all this, and it will be provided on a special link, so we understand that everything we talked about is probably like helpful and everything else on that set, but we understand that sometimes too it didn't necessarily provide a kind of a quick step-by-step process to implement a lot of the things that we talked about. So what we did was we created a guide. It's a quick action guide. So all the points that we addressed in the show are actually labeled in the guide, and it gives you just a few bullet points in which you can actually start taking action with. It's still very high level, but it just gives you a few bullet points for each topic that we discussed. So then that way you can go in and actually start doing these things that we were talking about now. So we just wanted to make that process easier. Yes, we could probably discuss them more, but it would make for a much longer episode. And, we just thought it would be easier if you actually had a document that you can reference at any time, opposed to always like clicking back 30 seconds out of the episode or downloading again or whatever. We'll just save you that trouble. We created a guide. How you can get to that is just simply going to rengenmarketing.com/128 download. 128 is an episode number of this show, but 128 download. It will also be in the show notes too, same name and convention, but for this in particular, it's rengenmarketing.com/128 download. Go to there. There'll be a quick sign up form, and then it will immediately be emailed to your address, your email account. So, and then you get that action guide that you can actually start taking action with, because like we said, we wanted this to be easy for you. And we wanted to, like, as you guys know, this is all something that we want to share this helpful advice with, and you guys to actually take and be able to use it, opposed to just getting inspired and moving forward. So that's our special. Again, last time, rengenmarketing.com/128 download and get your action guide today. All right, man. So I think that's all we have today. Anything else on your end?
No, that's all clear for me.
All right, good. Well, it sounds like now that we're done, you have some more literary agents to reach out to, but more importantly, some more Persona 4.
Yeah, definitely some more Persona 4.
All right. Well, again, thank you to all our listeners. We really appreciate you and hope you got a lot out of this episode. And we'll catch you sometime next time on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everyone, and thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustapha Price. A special thanks to Taisuke Kimura for creating the show's theme and Donnie Wilson for the logo design. If you enjoy and value the content, you can support us by visiting our Patreon, which is patreon.com/IGM podcast, and select the tier that meets your needs. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com/the number of this episode. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. So if you're looking for helpful marketing content or marketing plan template for your current game, then please visit rengenmarketing.com. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.